Hello. Hi, it's me, Dr. Catherine Toomer, and welcome to Dr. Toomer Talks on Tuesday. Don't try to say that too fast. Um, and I am a family medicine and community health physician and founder of Total Weight Care Institute, and I help patients with complete and compassionate um, weight care to maximize their health and wellness. And then I teach physicians also to provide compassionate and complete weight care to their patients so that they can enjoy maximum health. And I want to say thank you for all of you who show up for week to week, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Chris. And I also, if you're listening to this later, put in hashtag replay so I know you've been here. If you have questions, I'll answer them at the end. And you can also continue to post questions with the video, either on YouTube or Facebook in blackdoctor.org, or on my pages, and I will see them and I will answer them as well. Um, and so today I wanted to talk about chronic metabolic adiposity. Now that's a bit of a mouthful. And what it means is chronic means it's always lifelong. It's not acute. It's something that lasts for a long, long time. Metabolic means it's something within your body that your metabolism and other metabolic processes are involved. Adiposity means that it's making fat or putting down fat. And so when you have chronic metabolic adiposity, what that means is it's a chronic, lifelong metabolic issue that makes your body make fat. And another name we call this is obesity. Now, not all chronic metabolic adiposity is obesity, but all obesity, almost all, is usually due to chronic metabolic adiposity. Now, there are other issues and other things that can cause obesity that are not metabolic, but obesity in and of itself, when you have a lot of fat in your body, it automatically becomes a metabolic process just because our adipose or fat cells in our body start becoming its own organ, its own endocrine, its own hormonal organ. And so it does start a vicious cycle. However, for the purpose of today, what I'm going to talk about is just how weight gain or fat production can be chronic and metabolic, and it's the reason why and what we look at in order to treat it and reverse it. Now, I want to say something really quickly though. Not all chronic metabolic adiposity is obesity. There are people walking around who are not overweight, who are not obese, but their body over makes fat every time they eat. Every time they take in calories, their body makes more and more fat. Often you'll hear people say they have a fatty liver. They're not necessarily overweight, and yet they have too much fat in their liver, or they may have too much fat around their organs. You may see people who are thin and they might be larger through the middle. We often call those like beer bellies, but really what that is, it's actually their body's reaction to carbohydrates. And it so happens that beer is a carbohydrate. And so we call it a beer belly because often we see it in people who do drink a lot of beer, either because their belly's large or because their liver gets too large and it also makes their abdomen look large. But what chronic metabolic adiposity is just that. It's our body taking food and our metabolism mismanaging it and turning it into too much fat. And that can be in anyone, whether overweight or not overweight, whether having obesity or not having obesity, but it can happen. And usually what we see is waist circumference growing. People around the middle start getting larger and larger and larger. There are lots of different reasons why this can happen. And again, you can be large through the middle and not be overweight. And it's what we call our waist to hip ratio. As your waist to hip ratio increases, your health decreases. And so it's really important to pay attention to how much our weight is different from the rest of our body. If they're all proportionate, then it's a better indication of health than if they're disproportionate, regardless of how much someone weighs, regardless of their size. And so in men, it is usually over 38 inches. And for women, it's over 35 inches. Now, there's some adjustments made for different cultures that tend to be smaller in stature. But for the most part, it's 35 inches in women, 38 inches in men. And that combination is an indication that health is at risk. Now, if you have even smaller hips and larger waist, that's even more of a risk. And so that's one. Also, so measuring your waist is one way of determining it, and the other is um, finding out what your liver is doing. Getting a liver enzyme test, which is usually done automatically in what we call a complete metabolic profile. Hear that word again, metabolic. We also hear, basic metabolic profile, chronic metabolic, comprehensive metabolic profile, but it's metabolic. That M stands for metabolic, BMP and CMP. And so that's what we're looking at, how our kidneys are working, how our liver is working, but it's really the liver and our blood sugar that really indicates what's going on with our metabolic process, particularly if there's dysregulation, because blood sugar will go up and liver enzymes may go up. But you can actually have a fatty liver and not have such abnormal liver enzymes, but the liver does tend to get larger and there's other things that go on. But they also, another thing that we look for is um, the level of fat in our blood. So we call what we call a complete lipid profile. And a complete lipid profile is basically checking our cholesterol, checking our what are the good cholesterol, HDL, our bad cholesterol, LDL, or the very low density or VLDL. And then we talk about the other apoproteins and the inflammatory markers. Those aren't done automatically, but if your doctor is concerned or has some suspicion, they may be done. But liver enzymes are one, and blood work, blood sugar, and then hemoglobin A1C is another one, which says if your blood sugar has been high for a very long time. And then the last would be the uh, complete lipid profile. See, this is what happens when I don't write notes. I usually talk off my top of my head, but I can remember, and I have a few notes here or there, but I don't write it all out because I just speak easier when I do it this way. The other criteria is fat percentage. Again, you can be thin and have too much fat in your body. So if your fat percentage is high, which is 25% or more in men, 28% or more in women, then that's also adiposity. That is also a health risk. And you don't have to be overweight to have too much fat in your system. And you don't have to have obesity to have too much fat in your system. So again, I talk a lot about weight when really it's about fat. And this is why I'm talking about this today, because it is absolutely fat. And just because many of us may or may not be overweight doesn't mean it's not something we have to think about. Um, and so again, so how do you know if you have it? There are blood tests also. So I already talked about the complete metabolic uh, profile, which includes your liver, your blood sugar, the hemoglobin A1C, which says if your blood sugars are high, because often in chronic metabolic adiposity, insulin resistance is often a cause. And so checking a hemoglobin A1C or checking a glucose tolerance test and a free insulin level. Those are things you can talk to your doctor about and see if it's something that's required or something that might be indicated if you're concerned, particularly if you're someone who gains weight very easily and has a very difficult time losing it. No matter how well you eat, no matter how much you exercise, your body just seems to hold on to weight, to fat, I should say, especially if that fat forms around your middle. No matter what your size, no matter how much you weigh, if you notice that you're starting to go through the middle and it's fat, then there means there's an underlying health issue that needs to be addressed, and these tests can find them. And so the other is I talked about percentage of fat. Now, the only way that you can determine how much percentage of your body fat is to get a very specific type of test, which is a body composition test. Now, there's some that are really elaborate that they use for athletes and bodybuilders and all the rest, but mostly you can get them now almost anywhere. And many of your doctors may have one. I have one that kind of tells the difference between muscle, bone, and intracellular and extracellular water. And then it also says what percentage of fat is there. And it doesn't matter what your BMI is. It doesn't matter what your weight is. It really matters what your body fat percentage is. And so you want to be under 28% if you're a woman and under 25% if you're a man. And of course, I won't talk about what happens when it goes too low. That's a discussion for another day, but we'll talk about that some other time. And then I also talked about the glucose tolerance test and a free insulin level. And that is, again, is something you can discuss with your doctor about that. So what do you do if it turns out that you think you have, chronic metabolic adiposity, or you have it and you have some like insulin resistance, you have pre-diabetes, you are diabetic, or you're someone who again is going through the middle, you're going through menopause. Menopause will push us into this as well. High cortisol, high stress. I talk about that a lot. High stress can push you into this as well. What do you do? Well, you go after the cause. And so there's a metabolic cause. And so you go after all the metabolic reasons that this happens. And so you control blood sugar, first of all, which controls your insulin. And you can do that with diet, primarily plant-based, primarily protein, um, reduced carbohydrates, or reduced percentage of carbohydrates. Now, I'm not a big fan of dropping calories way low because that can affect your metabolism. But what I do say is whatever carb you eat, there should be 3/4 more of other things of vegetables and protein, so that your carbohydrate is always about 25% of what you eat. So regardless of how much it should still be 25% or less of the total of your meal. And so if you do that, it helps control blood sugar, helps control insulin, and therefore helps control body fat production. The other that you can do is build muscle. Muscle is a metabolic organ. The more muscle you have, the healthier your metabolic process is, your metabolic environment within your body is. So always build muscle, toning, resistant training. It doesn't have to be bulking. It just has to be building. It has to be strengthening. And, it doesn't have to be big to be healthy. It just needs to be stronger. And so getting stronger is one of the ways to help with this, because your muscle in and of itself can act like medicine. It in and of itself can help reverse some of this process. And it definitely helps improve it, even if it can't reverse it. And then the other is staying on top of your numbers. Always know what your blood sugar is, always know what your hemoglobin A1C is, always know what your liver function is at least once a year, your kidney function at least once a year. And if you suspect that there's something else going on, you can speak to your doctor about that. Getting your thyroid checked if you're suddenly noticing unusual weight gain or unusual increase in waist size, because really often it's not a change in weight, it's simply a change in how much fat is in our body. And that doesn't necessarily mean weight gain. It just means body change. And that body change is often the only indication we have is our waist getting bigger. And so that is an indication sometimes that there's too much fat in the wrong places. And therefore, it's time to find out why that is the case. And so, just to reiterate, number one, what is it? Chronic metabolic adiposity is a long-term metabolic process that inappropriately takes food and calories and turns it to fat in ways that are unnecessary for health and for body function. How do you know if you have it? Oh, you suspect you have it if your waist circumference is growing, meaning the measurement of your waist is growing, but the rest of your body isn't. Or if your weight and your waist, sorry, not your weight, your waist and your hip are disproportionate in that your waist is larger, then again, that's an indication. If your body fat percentage, if you're over 25 or more if you're a man, and 28% or more if you're a woman, and you can get that through body composition testing. And the other is to make sure that your liver enzymes, and you don't have fatty liver, and your liver enzymes are fine. And so again, testing, body composition scale, glucose tolerance test, complete metabolic panel, and liver, sorry, not liver, lipid, your fat, complete fat profile as well. And what to do? Plant-based, plant-based, plant-based as much as possible, focusing on protein, making protein the star of every meal and snack, making sure you reduce your stress, because cortisol, the stress hormone, will make all of this worse. And also making sure you get enough sleep, enough water, and muscle, and more muscle. Muscle is one of the best, building and strengthening muscle is one of the best things you can do for your health, not just now, but for later. So again, I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer, family medicine, community health physician, founder of Total Weight Care Institute, and I'm here for my every Tuesday, 6 p.m. live in my page and blackdoctor.org, both on Facebook and on YouTube. So make sure that you follow and subscribe so you don't miss it. I do this every week. And if you have topics that you'd like me to talk about, please, you can send me an email at courage@drtoomer.com, or you can just leave a message in one of the videos that I've done. I have my notifications on, so I always know when I get a message. So please let me know and ask me questions. And thank you, Dr. Kim. She says that Dr. Toomer is a highly trained expert and a wonderful person. Awesome to learn from you, Dr. Toomer. Thank you so much, and thank you for your support. So if you have any questions for me, or if you have any comments or anything that you'd like to share, now would be the time, because we got about one more minute, and then I'll say goodbye. So if not, then, well, thank you so much for coming. And again, if you're watching now, I appreciate you coming so much. And if you're watching this later, then please write #replay so I know that you've been here, and ask your questions, and I promise that I will respond. All right. Well, you all have a good evening, and I will see you next Tuesday at the same time and at the same place. Good night.